The Manhattan skyline shimmered like a promise that night. From the terrace of the River Cafe in Brooklyn, the city looked untouchable. Silver glass towers glowing against the dark water, reflections trembling in the East River like fragile secrets. Investors laughed over vintage Bordeaux. Crystal glasses caught candlelight. A Rolex flashed beneath the table as hands shook over a deal rumored to reshape medical AI forever. And at the center of it all stood Nathaniel Crawford. 42, CEO, visionary. The man Forbes called the future of ethical technology. Beside him stood his wife, Isabella Monroe Crawford, 7 months pregnant. Her hand rested lightly against her belly beneath a navy Dior dress she had worn once before, on their 5th anniversary, back when he still looked at her like she mattered. Tonight, he didn't look at her at all. Smile, Nate muttered under his breath, not turning his head. Investors are watching. Bella forced her lips upward. Across the table sat venture capital partners from Park Avenue. A Montblanc pen lay beside Nate's leather portfolio. His iPhone buzzed twice, face down, but he didn't check it. Claire Hastings did. Claire, polished and precise in ivory silk, caught Bella's eye for half a second. Not sympathy. Not kindness. Something else. Calculation. The conversation shifted to projections, revenue, FDA approvals, expansion into Europe. Bella cleared her throat softly. There's still an unresolved compliance review, she said carefully. The AI trial data from... The sentence never finished. The sound cracked through the terrace before anyone understood what had happened. A sharp movement, a stunned inhale, and then silence. The skyline still shimmered, but at their table everything stopped. Bella's cheek burned. Across the terrace, a waiter stepped forward. He didn't rush. He didn't look shocked. He looked furious. And when his eyes met Nate's, something far more dangerous than embarrassment settled into the air. For 3 full seconds, no one moved. The soft violin music from inside the restaurant continued, absurdly elegant, as if nothing had fractured. Candle flames trembled in the breeze rolling off the East River. A boat horn echoed somewhere in the distance. Bella did not cry. That was the first thing everyone noticed. She remained standing, one hand instinctively shielding her belly, the other frozen mid-air where her glass of sparkling water had been. A thin red mark began to bloom along her cheekbone. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't violent. It was humiliating. Across the long linen table, the venture partners stared in disbelief. One of them slowly lowered his wineglass. Another shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the Manhattan skyline as if it might offer an exit from what they had just witnessed. Nathaniel Crawford adjusted his cufflinks. I apologize, he said coolly, his voice steady. My wife has been under emotional strain due to pregnancy. Let's stay focused. The words fell heavier than the sound had. Claire inhaled sharply but said nothing. Her manicured fingers tightened around her iPhone beneath the table. The screen glowed faintly in her lap. Recording. Bella's ears rang, not from the impact, but from the calmness in Nate's tone. He wasn't embarrassed. He wasn't shaken. He was controlling the narrative. I was simply asking about the compliance review, Bella managed, her voice soft but clear. Nate leaned closer, smiling for the investors. Sweetheart, he murmured, just loud enough for the table to hear. This isn't the place. The waiter had reached the edge of their table now. He stood tall, posture straight, hands clasped behind his back in professional restraint. But his jaw was tight. Too tight. Sir, he said evenly, addressing Nate. Would you like a moment of privacy? Nate didn't look at him. No, he replied flatly. We're fine. The waiter's eyes shifted, not to Bella's face, but to her belly. And something changed. A subtle shift in his stance. Not employee to customer. man to man. The investors sensed it. The tension thickened. Because this was no longer just an awkward dinner. This was exposure. And someone at that table had just made a mistake they would never recover from. Nathaniel finally looked at him. It was the kind of glance powerful men give service staff. Brief, dismissive, conditioned by years of being obeyed. "I said we're fine," Nate repeated, his tone colder now. The waiter didn't move. Up close, he didn't look young. Mid-30s, maybe older. Clean cut. Calm. His black uniform fit too precisely, like he was more accustomed to tailored suits than aprons. His eyes never wavered. "Ma'am," he said gently to Bella, "would you like to step inside for some water?" Bella hesitated. That single moment, that pause, was louder than the slap. Because for the first time that night, someone had asked what she wanted. Nate's jaw tightened. "She's staying." It wasn't a suggestion. The investors shifted again, while one cleared his throat. Another checked his Apple Watch. No one intervened. Power had gravity, and Nate carried it like a weapon. Bella drew in a slow breath. The River Cafe terrace suddenly felt smaller. The Manhattan skyline that once looked magical now felt like an audience. "I think I need a moment," she said quietly. Nate's smile froze. Isabella. Her full name. A warning. The waiter stepped half a pace forward. Not aggressive. Not dramatic. Just enough to break the visual control Nate had over her. "With respect, sir," he said evenly. "The lady has spoken." The word respect landed like a challenge. Nate stood. The movement was abrupt enough that Claire's phone nearly slipped from her hand. A few diners turned their heads. Conversations faltered at nearby tables. "Do you know who you're speaking to?" Nate asked. The waiter held his gaze. "Yes." There was no fear in his voice. That unsettled Nate more than defiance would have. For a brief second, something flickered across the waiter's face. Not anger, not shock. Recognition. He looked at Bella again, this time differently. Not as a guest, not as a stranger, as family. Bella felt it. A strange pull in her chest, familiar, unexplainable. 8 years of silence stirred in one glance. Nate stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You work here. Remember that." The waiter's expression didn't change. "Not for long," he replied. And in that instant, something invisible shifted at the table. Because Nathaniel Crawford still believed he controlled the room, he had no idea the most dangerous person there wasn't one of the investors. It was the man wearing the apron. For a moment, it looked like Nathaniel Crawford might escalate. His shoulders squared, his chin lifted. The investors watched him carefully now, no longer amused, no longer impressed. A CEO about to go public could not afford spectacle. Not tonight. Bella felt it before she saw it. The shift in calculation behind Nate's eyes. Image first. Always image. He exhaled sharply and forced a thin smile. "Take 5 minutes," he said, as if granting permission to a child. "Then we finish this discussion." Bella didn't respond. The waiter stepped slightly aside, giving her space to move without being touched, without being guided. That small detail mattered more than anyone at the table understood. She walked, not fast, not dramatic, just steady. The terrace doors opened and closed behind them, sealing off the skyline and the whispering investors. Inside, the dining room glowed in warm amber light. Crystal chandeliers shimmered. Silverware chimed softly against porcelain. Life continued, as if nothing had cracked outside. Bella's breathing finally trembled. She pressed her palm to the marble wall near the hostess stand. The cool surface grounded her. Her reflection in the mirror looked foreign, composed, elegant, but with a faint red mark that would not disappear by pretending. "I'm sorry," the waiter said quietly. She shook her head. "You didn't do anything. I should have intervened sooner." That voice. There was something in it. Restrained fury layered over years of distance. Bella looked at him fully now. Up close, she saw what she hadn't allowed herself to see on the terrace. The familiar line of his jaw. The scar near his eyebrow from a childhood accident. The way he stood slightly angled, protective even when silent. Her breath caught. "Noah," she whispered. The name felt impossible after 8 years. He didn't smile. He didn't deny it. "It's been a while, Bells." The world tilted more than it had from the slap. Outside, through the glass, she could see Nate laughing again at the table, performing recovery, reclaiming control. But inside, something far older than humiliation was surfacing. "You shouldn't be here," she said faintly. "I know," Noah replied. His eyes hardened as he glanced toward the terrace, but neither should he. Bella felt tears finally rise, not from pain, but from recognition. And for the first time that night, she wasn't alone. What she didn't know yet was this. Noah hadn't come to Brooklyn by accident. He had been watching Nathaniel Crawford for months. Bella stared at her brother, as if he might disappear again. 8 years ago, she had chosen Nathaniel Crawford over her family, over Noah, over every warning he had tried to give her in their tiny Boston kitchen, when Nate first entered their lives, with polished shoes and Park Avenue ambition. "You don't know him," she had said back then. Tonight, she wasn't so sure she had ever known her husband at all. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice unsteady but quiet. Noah glanced toward the terrace. Through the glass, Nate was animated again, leaning into conversation, gesturing confidently as if nothing had happened. Claire sat beside him, composed, phone resting face down. "I took the shift," Noah replied calmly. "You don't work here." A pause. "Not permanently." That answer was deliberate. Bella studied him more carefully. His uniform was immaculate, his posture too assured. Even the way he stood, not defensive, not apologetic, felt calculated. "You've been watching him," she whispered. Noah didn't deny it. "I've been watching the company," he corrected. Her heart skipped. The compliance review. The AI trial data. The tension in Nate's voice whenever she asked about projections. It hadn't just been about ego. "What did he do?" she asked. Noah stepped closer, lowering his voice. "This isn't the place." He reached into his apron pocket and pulled out a simple white business card. No logo, no flashy design, just a name embossed in understated black lettering. Noah Monroe Capital Advisory. Bella blinked. She had heard of Monroe Capital, everyone in finance had, or a private equity firm known for dismantling unstable companies before they collapsed publicly. Ruthless, precise, quiet. "You?" Her breath faltered. "Yes." The sound of laughter from the terrace floated through the glass again. Nate was recovering the room, rebuilding dominance. Noah's jaw tightened. "He's pushing forward with the IPO despite unresolved federal flags," he said evenly. "And if that launches the way he's planning, it won't just hurt investors." Bella's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. It could hurt patience. The words landed heavier than the slap. Suddenly, tonight wasn't just humiliation. It was something far more dangerous. Outside, Nate raised his glass in a toast. Inside, Bella realized the man she married might not just be cruel. He might be reckless. And Noah hadn't come here to protect her feelings. And he had come to stop a catastrophe. Bella felt the ground shift beneath her, not physically, but emotionally. For years, she had convinced herself that distance from Noah was maturity, that cutting ties with her older brother had been necessary to build her own life, that Nate's disapproval of her family had been about focus, not control. Now, standing inside the River Cafe with Manhattan glowing beyond the glass, she saw the truth differently. "You told me he wasn't clean," she whispered. Noah's expression didn't soften. I told you his numbers didn't add up. 8 years ago, Noah had worked as a financial analyst in Boston. He had flagged irregularities in a startup Nate had aggressively acquired. Bella had defended her fiancé, accused Noah of jealousy, of sabotage. Nate had framed it as betrayal. "He's trying to ruin us," Nate had said back then, pacing their Fifth Avenue penthouse with controlled outrage. "If you choose him, Bella, you're choosing someone who doesn't believe in us." And she had chosen her husband. Noah had left without another word. "I thought you were trying to control me," Bella admitted now, her voice fragile. "He said you didn't respect my decisions." Noah gave a short, humorless breath. "Control? Bells, I was trying to protect you." Outside, applause rippled across the terrace. Nate must have delivered a compelling projection. Investors loved confidence. They mistook certainty for integrity. "He isolated you," Noah continued. "Gradually. From me. From Boston. From anyone who questioned him." Bella remembered the small changes, joint accounts shifting to single signature authorization, her law license quietly lapsing because she didn't need to work, the prenup clause about reputational damage that she had skimmed over in love. "You said catastrophe," she murmured. "What does that mean?" Noah's eyes darkened. "Their AI diagnostic model flagged false negatives during beta trials," he said evenly. "If that system scales nationally before correction, patients could be misdiagnosed." Her stomach tightened. "And he knows?" she asked. "Yes." The word came without hesitation. Silence pressed between them. Bella thought about the man raising a toast outside, the same man who had just struck her and blamed hormones, the same man who spoke about ethics in keynote speeches. "You're going after him," she said slowly. Noah shook his head. "I'm going after the truth." He met her eyes then, steady, unflinching. "But if he stands in its way, he won't survive what comes next." Bella's pulse refused to slow. The restaurant noise faded into a distant hum, as if her mind had stepped outside her body. Patients misdiagnosed, federal flags, an IPO racing forward anyway. The humiliation on the terrace now felt secondary, a symptom of something far larger. "How far does this go?" she asked. Noah glanced toward the bar, ensuring no one lingered close enough to overhear. "Far enough that 3 institutional investors quietly reduced their exposure last quarter," he said. "Far enough that internal compliance reports were edited before board review." Bella's legal instincts, long buried beneath years of curated charity galas and penthouse brunches, began to resurface. Edited how? Risk probability language softened, and data anomalies labeled temporary variances. That sounded like Nate. Not reckless, strategic. Just enough manipulation to buy time, to launch first and fix later. "You said you're not going after him," Bella pressed. "But Monroe Capital dismantles companies before collapse." Noah held her gaze. "We dismantle deception." The distinction mattered to him. "You own shares," she realized suddenly. A slight nod. "Through layered funds, 18% exposure across holding entities." Her breath hitched. "You're one of his largest silent investors." "Yes." The word landed like another revelation. "He doesn't know," Noah added. Bella pictured Nate in the Park Avenue boardroom, confident, certain he controlled every lever. He loved reminding directors that he built the company from nothing, that loyalty was owed upward, not sideways. "If this surfaces before IPO," she whispered. "The SEC pauses everything," Noah replied. "The valuation drops, lawsuits follow." "And you?" she asked quietly. "I lose money." He said it without hesitation. The simplicity of it stunned her. "You're willing to lose millions?" Noah's jaw tightened. "I'm not willing to let people get hurt." The sincerity in his voice cracked something inside her that had been frozen for years. From the terrace came another burst of laughter. Nate was reclaiming dominance, rebuilding his narrative. Bella looked through the glass and saw her husband differently now, not just as a man who struck her, but as a man gambling with lives. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Noah didn't hesitate. The truth. And in that moment, Bella understood something terrifying. She wasn't just a witness. She was leverage. Bella didn't return to the terrace. Instead, she walked past the hostess stand, past the candlelit tables, and into the quiet corridor leading toward the restrooms. The mirror there was unforgiving. The faint redness on her cheek had softened, but the imprint of humiliation lingered deeper than skin. Leverage. Noah's word echoed in her mind. She had spent years believing she had no power in her marriage, financially dependent, socially isolated, legally cornered by a prenuptial agreement she had signed in Nate's sleek Park Avenue office, while his attorney smiled reassuringly. "You're protected," Nate had said then. "This is standard." She pulled out her phone and opened the cloud drive she hadn't accessed in years. The scanned copy of the prenup still sat there, untouched. 37 pages of dense legal language. Her hands trembled slightly as she began scrolling. Clause 14. Reputation and corporate harm. If the spouse engaged in behavior that damaged the public standing of Crawford Medical Technologies, she forfeited all claims to marital assets. At the time, she had laughed. Why would she ever harm his company? Now she read further. Clause 22. Disclosure obligations. Both parties affirm that no material information regarding pending federal investigations, compliance breaches, or financial misstatements has been knowingly withheld prior to signing. Bella's breath stopped. The prenup had been signed 2 weeks after Noah confronted Nate about accounting irregularities in his previous acquisition. 2 weeks. Her mind raced back to that night in Boston. Nate had flown in, furious, claiming Noah was spreading false accusations. Bella had defended her fiancé. Noah had left. If Nate had already known about federal flags at that time, if he had failed to disclose risk before she signed, then Clause 22 wasn't just technical language, it was vulnerability. The hallway suddenly felt too small. Outside, applause swelled again from the terrace. Nate must have stood for another toast. Bella stared at the screen. If she exposed him, she risked everything. Public scandal, divorce, financial warfare, a custody battle before her son was even born. If she stayed silent, Patience might suffer. And the man who had just humiliated her would continue to build an empire on polished lies. Her reflection in the mirror no longer looked fragile. It looked awake. Bella closed the document slowly. For the first time in 8 years, she wasn't choosing between her husband and her brother. She was choosing between fear and truth. And she knew which one Nate never expected her to pick. Claire Hastings had not stopped recording. She sat back at the terrace table, posture elegant, expression neutral, while Nathaniel Crawford rebuilt the atmosphere with smooth confidence. He spoke about expansion, about ethical innovation, about projected partnerships with hospital networks across California and New York. The investors were leaning in again. They wanted to believe him. Claire let her phone screen dim before slipping it into her clutch. The video was clear, the audio sharper than expected, the moment of impact, the silence after. Nate's voice reframing it as pregnancy instability. Evidence, but not the kind she would use immediately. Claire had learned something working beside powerful men. Timing was everything. When Bella had walked off the terrace, Nate's mask had cracked for half a second. Claire saw it. The flash of irritation wasn't about embarrassment. It was about risk. He hated variables. And tonight, Bella had become one. "Nate," one of the venture partners said carefully, Everything's aligned for Q4 launch, correct? No pending federal interference? Nate didn't hesitate. Clean trajectory. Claire lowered her eyes to her wine glass, hiding the subtle tightening in her expression. Clean trajectory. 2 weeks ago, she had sat in a compliance meeting where internal counsel advised delaying expansion until the beta anomalies were resolved. Nate had dismissed it as overly cautious legal paranoia. She had kept the memo. She hadn't intended to use it, at least not yet. Claire was ambitious, not reckless. She had entered the relationship with Nate believing proximity to power would secure her future. A promotion, equity, stability. But lately, she had sensed distance, shorter replies, late-night calls he took outside, his insistence that after IPO, structures would shift. Shift. How? She watched him laugh now, perfectly composed, the Manhattan skyline glittering behind him, like a halo he believed he deserved. Claire understood something Bella likely didn't yet. Nate didn't protect people. He repositioned them. And if federal scrutiny intensified, if investors grew nervous, someone would need to absorb blame. Claire had no intention of being that someone. Across the terrace doors, she caught a glimpse of Bella inside, speaking to the waiter. The waiter? Claire's eyes narrowed slightly. Something about him didn't fit. He wasn't intimidated. He wasn't deferential. And Nate hadn't noticed. That oversight might prove more dangerous than the slap. Claire lifted her glass slowly. If a fire was coming for Crawford Medical Technologies, she intended to hold the match, not be burned by it. Nathaniel Crawford finished the dinner like nothing had happened. By the time dessert arrived, laughter had returned to the terrace. Investors discussed projected margins. One mentioned expanding into European markets. Another joked about celebrating the IPO at the Plaza Hotel once the valuation crossed $2 billion. Nate thrived in this environment. He believed momentum erased weakness. "Gentlemen," he said smoothly, lifting his glass, "innovation rewards the bold." They nodded. Bold, not cautious, not compliant, not delayed. But Claire watched him carefully. He was in full performance mode now. Charming, decisive, unshakable. If anyone at that table still felt uneasy about the earlier incident, they buried it beneath projected returns. But Claire noticed something else. Bella had not returned. Nate's gaze flicked toward the dining room doors once, briefly. Irritation, not concern. He leaned closer to the lead investor. "Personal matters won't interfere with Q4, he assured. "Everything is secured." Secured? Claire felt the word settle uncomfortably in her chest. After the guests began leaving, handshakes exchanged, Nate finally exhaled. The skyline shimmered triumphantly behind him. He turned to Claire. "Send a note to legal tomorrow," he said quietly. "I want updated language drafted around spousal liability clauses." Her pulse skipped. "For the prenup?" she asked carefully. "Yes." His voice lowered further. "If she becomes unstable publicly, I won't have it affecting valuation." Unstable. Claire studied him. "You're concerned she might speak?" she asked. Nate's expression hardened slightly. "She won't. She knows the consequences." Confidence again. But this time, Claire heard something beneath it. Fear. Because Nate understood something most men like him eventually did. Humiliation breeds unpredictability. He checked his iPhone as they walked toward the exit. No messages from Bella. No calls. Good. He believed silence meant control. Across the dining room, unseen by him, Noah stood near the bar, speaking quietly with the restaurant manager. Calm. Composed. Watching. Nathaniel Crawford stepped into the cool Brooklyn night believing he had survived a misstep. When he did not realize the real damage had not happened on the terrace, It had happened inside his own house, and the people closest to him were already recalculating his fall. 2 mornings later, the Park Avenue boardroom felt colder than usual. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed midtown Manhattan in sharp winter light. The long walnut table reflected the glow of stock tickers scrolling across a mounted screen. Crawford Medical Technologies' valuation estimate shimmered in bold numbers. Projected IPO, $2.3 billion. Nathaniel Crawford stood at the head of the table, Mont Blanc pen resting between his fingers like a conductor's baton. "We are fully aligned for Q4 filing," he said confidently. "Regulatory inquiries have been addressed." Most of the board nodded, but not all. At the far end of the table sat a new face, introduced only as a representative of Monroe Strategic Holdings. Quiet, immaculate suit. No unnecessary gestures. Nathaniel had skimmed the acquisition report quickly the night before. Monroe had gradually increased its position over the last 6 months. Aggressive, calculated. He didn't like surprises. "Before we proceed," the Monroe representative said evenly, "we'd like clarification on beta trial false negative rates." The room stilled. Nathaniel smiled faintly. All anomalies were statistically insignificant. "According to which internal memo?" the representative asked. A screen lit up. Slide after slide appeared. Red-lined compliance notes, time-stamped revisions, language softened from critical variance to temporary deviation. Nathaniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "It's our draft documents," he replied smoothly. "Preliminary assessments." The Monroe representative folded his hands. "Then perhaps the FDA should evaluate the preliminary assessments directly." Silence expanded across the polished table. One board member shifted in his chair. Another cleared his throat. "Is there federal exposure?" someone asked quietly. Nathaniel felt something he hadn't felt in years. Pressure. Not external. Internal. Controlled environments had always been his strength. Investor dinners. Keynote speeches. Negotiations. He dictated tempo. But this wasn't tempo. This was scrutiny. The Monroe representative continued calmly. "Monroe Strategic is prepared to request an independent audit before IPO submission." Nathaniel's gaze hardened. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds," the man replied. That long-term valuation requires verified integrity." Integrity. The word hung heavier than accusation. Nathaniel leaned back slowly. "This feels adversarial," he said. "Transparency often does," the representative answered. Across the city, Bella sat in the Fifth Avenue penthouse, rereading Clause 22. And for the first time since building his empire, Nathaniel Crawford realized something dangerous. He no longer controlled the room. By noon, the rumor had reached Wall Street. It didn't break through headlines yet. There were no flashing banners, no breaking news alerts, just a quiet tremor beneath the surface, the kind seasoned investors recognized before the rest of the market caught up. An independent audit request from a major shareholder. Nathaniel Crawford stood inside his corner office on Park Avenue and staring at the Manhattan skyline through glass walls that once felt invincible. His iPhone buzzed repeatedly on the polished desk. Messages from legal, from Claire, from 2 early-stage investors asking for clarification. Clarification was a polite word for doubt. Behind him, the muted television displayed a financial news channel. The ticker at the bottom still showed projected valuation numbers, but analysts were beginning to speculate about regulatory timing risks. Timing risks. He turned sharply as his CFO entered. "They've frozen 2 institutional commitments," the CFO said quietly. "Pending audit review." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Temporarily," he replied. "We don't know that." Silence thickened between them. Across town, in the Fifth Avenue penthouse, Bella sat at the dining table with her MacBook open. She watched the same financial broadcast without sound. The anchor's expression was careful but cautious. She felt something unfamiliar rising in her chest. Not fear. Consequences. Her phone lit up. Noah. It started. 2 words. She stared at them for a long moment. Back in the boardroom, the Monroe representative had filed the formal request for independent third-party verification. Legally justified, procedurally clean, impossible to dismiss without raising more suspicion. Nathaniel's assistant knocked once before entering. "Sir, Monroe Strategic has requested emergency session with outside counsel." Of course they had. Nathaniel exhaled slowly, calculating angles. Delay the audit. Question methodology. Frame it as competitive interference. He had maneuvered through pressure before, but this felt different. This wasn't rumor. It was documentation. The muted television flickered as a financial analyst spoke. While Crawford Medical remains a promising IPO candidate, increased regulatory scrutiny could materially impact projected valuation. Materially impact. Nathaniel picked up the remote and turned the volume off completely. He still believed he could recover this. He just hadn't realized yet that the market wasn't reacting to numbers. It was reacting to truth. The video surfaced at 4:17 p.m. Not through tabloids. Not through social media influencers' hunting scandal. It appeared first in a legal disclosure attachment filed alongside the independent audit notice. Unlisted. Unadvertised. But public. Within minutes, a junior analyst at a midtown hedge fund downloaded the document set. By 4:32, the clip was circulating through encrypted investor chats. By 5:05, the financial blogger posted a single sentence: Crawford CEO under scrutiny following restaurant incident. The footage was short. Elegant terrace. Manhattan skyline glowing. Bella speaking calmly about compliance review. Then the motion. The sound. The silence. Nathaniel's voice reframing it. Pregnancy strain. Stay focused. The clip didn't show rage. It showed composure. That was worse. Inside his Park Avenue office, Nathaniel watched it on his MacBook Pro, expression carved in stone. Claire stood across the room, hands folded tightly in front of her. "I didn't leak it," she said quietly. He didn't respond immediately. He replayed the audio instead, the way his voice sounded, controlled, dismissive, calculated. "That was private," he said finally. "Not if it happened in public," Claire replied carefully. His gaze shifted toward her. You recorded it. It wasn't a question." "Yes." "Why?" "Insurance." She didn't say the word aloud. "For documentation," she answered. Nathaniel stood slowly. "Who has access?" "The audit team, outside counsel, anyone reviewing compliance exposure. In other words, everyone who mattered." Across the city, Bella sat on the edge of the penthouse sofa, hands resting over her stomach, as the clip played on silent across a financial news site. The headline remained cautious. "Leadership conduct raises governance concerns." Governance concerns. Not abuse. Not scandal. Reputation. Exactly the language in Clause 14. Her phone vibrated. Noah. It wasn't me. She believed him. Because this leak wasn't strategic. It was procedural. Nathaniel's own legal structure had required full disclosure once the audit triggered material risk review. He had built a system to protect himself, and that system had just exposed him. Back in the office, his assistant stepped inside. 2 board members have requested emergency removal discussion. Removal. The word lingered in the air. Nathaniel Crawford had always believed he controlled the narrative. Tonight, the narrative was controlling him. By morning, the narrative had shifted. Financial outlets no longer used cautious language. The words governance failure and leadership misconduct appeared in bold beneath Crawford Medical Technology's name. Analysts debated not only the audit, but whether a CEO capable of public humiliation could be trusted with ethical AI oversight. The stock ticker didn't crash, not yet. It trembled. Pre-IPO shares traded in secondary markets began dipping. Nothing catastrophic, or just enough to make institutional investors uneasy. In the Park Avenue boardroom, Nathaniel stood alone at the head of the table before the emergency session began. The skyline outside felt colder, less triumphant than it had days ago. Board members filed in without the usual small talk. No one mentioned the video. That was the most unsettling part. "We need containment," one director began bluntly. "This is escalating beyond compliance review." "It's a domestic matter," Nathaniel replied evenly. "Irrelevant to product performance." A pause. "Investors don't separate character from governance," another director said, "especially before IPO." Character. Nathaniel felt the word settle like grit in his throat. Across town, Bella watched the coverage from the penthouse dining table. The silence inside the apartment was heavier than the headlines. Nate hadn't returned home the previous night. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Mrs. Crawford," a measured male voice said. "This is counsel for the board. We'd like to confirm your well-being." Well-being. Bella almost laughed at the precision of it. "I'm fine," she replied calmly. "And you are not pursuing any public statement?" There it was, the real question. Clause 14 lingered in her mind. Reputational harm, asset forfeiture. She looked at her reflection in the darkened window, not the fragile woman on the terrace, but someone steady. "I haven't made any decisions," she answered. Back in the boardroom, the Monroe representative spoke again. "We propose temporary suspension of CEO authority pending audit completion." The word suspension echoed. Nathaniel's composure thinned. "This is overreaction," he said sharply. "You're reacting to optics." "No," the representative replied evenly. "We're reacting to risk." And for the first time since building Crawford Medical from nothing, Nathaniel understood something irreversible. He was no longer defending a valuation. He was defending his position. And those were not the same battle. The vote lasted less than 12 minutes. 12 minutes to unravel 15 years of carefully constructed dominance. Nathaniel stood at the head of the Park Avenue boardroom table, while legal counsel outlined procedural language. The tone was neutral, clinical. No emotion. Just governance. "Pending completion of the independent audit," counsel said. "The board will temporarily suspend CEO authority to preserve fiduciary responsibility." Suspend, not remove, not terminate. But the distinction felt thin. One by one, hands rose, measured, reluctant, inevitable. Nathaniel didn't look at them as they voted. He stared instead at the Manhattan skyline beyond the glass. The city he had conquered, the city that had rewarded ambition and punished hesitation. He had never hesitated. Until now. The final count was unanimous. Temporary suspension effective immediately. The words echoed in the room long after they were spoken. Claire sat 2 seats away, silent. She didn't celebrate. She didn't react. She understood what this meant. If he fell, collateral damage would follow. Nathaniel finally turned. "You're making a mistake," he said evenly. No one responded, because for the first time, the room wasn't reacting to his confidence. It was reacting to documented risk. Across town, Bella's phone lit up. "Noah." "It's done." 2 simple words. She closed her eyes briefly. This wasn't triumph. Not yet. This was consequence. The television in the penthouse flickered with updated commentary. Sources confirm Crawford Medical's board has enacted temporary leadership restructuring pending compliance review. Restructuring. Corporate language for fracture. Bella felt the baby shift inside her, a small, steady reminder of what truly mattered. Minutes later, the penthouse door opened. Nathaniel entered without greeting. His suit jacket was still crisp, his expression still composed. But something behind his eyes had shifted. "They suspended me," he said flatly. Bella met his gaze calmly. "I heard." He stepped closer. "So, you think this is victory?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. I think this is accountability." For the first time, Nathaniel Crawford didn't have a prepared response, and the silence between them felt more powerful than any board vote. Nathaniel didn't shout. That would have been easier. Instead, he walked past Bella into the living room of the Fifth Avenue penthouse and set his phone down with precise control. The Manhattan skyline beyond the glass looked colder now, stripped of triumph. "This is temporary," he said. "The audit will clear." The board panicked. Bella remained seated at the dining table, hands folded calmly over her stomach. "You knew about the false negatives," she said. It wasn't accusation. It was fact. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Every technology has variants during beta trials. "You edited the language." "That's called strategic positioning." She studied him quietly. "And the video?" she asked. "Was that strategic too?" His composure flickered. "You humiliated me publicly," she continued, voice steady. "Then blamed my pregnancy." "That was optics," he replied sharply. "You brought up compliance in front of investors." There it was, control over truth. Bella stood slowly. "Clause 22, she said. The words landed like a crack in glass. Nathaniel stilled. "What about it?" he asked carefully. "You signed a disclosure statement affirming no material federal flags were pending prior to our prenup." His silence confirmed more than denial ever could. "You knew about regulatory concerns before I signed," she said. "Those weren't material at the time." "That's not what the memo says." Nathaniel's eyes sharpened. "You've been digging. I've been reading." The difference mattered. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If you challenge the prenup, this becomes a spectacle. Media, depositions, reputational damage. You'll be dragged through it." Bella met his gaze without flinching. "I already was." Silence settled between them. He expected fear, retreat, emotional collapse. Instead, he saw clarity. "You think Monroe is behind this?" he asked quietly. Bella didn't answer, because she didn't need to. Nathaniel exhaled slowly, recalculating. "Careful, Isabella," he warned. "Once this escalates, there's no going back." She rested her hand over her stomach. "I'm not going back," she replied. And for the first time since the terrace, Nathaniel Crawford realized something far more dangerous than suspension. He had lost control of her. The audit findings were released the same morning Bella went into labor. At 6:42 a.m., her water broke in the silent penthouse bedroom overlooking Fifth Avenue. The city was just waking up, pale winter light stretching across the skyline. Nathaniel wasn't home. He had spent the night with legal counsel. Bella didn't panic. She called Noah. He answered on the first ring. "I'm on my way," he said. At 8:15 a.m., in a private Manhattan hospital suite, Bella gripped the side rails of the bed as contractions tightened in steady waves. The television mounted across the room was muted, but the captions ran clearly. "Independent audit confirms material disclosure failures at Crawford Medical Technologies." Material disclosure failures. The phrase echoed through financial media like a controlled explosion. Noah stood near the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled back. Not billionaire, not strategist. Brother. "Breathe, Bells," he said quietly. She did. Between contractions, she caught fragments of headlines scrolling across her phone. Board votes to remove Crawford permanently pending federal inquiry. Permanent removal. The word felt final. Nathaniel texted once, "We need to talk." She didn't respond. By early afternoon, the labor intensified. pain sharpened. Fear flickered briefly. Not of Nate, not of scandal, but of becoming a mother in the middle of public collapse. Noah stepped closer when she faltered. "You're not alone," he said. And she believed him. At 2:37 p.m., her son entered the world. The room fell into a different kind of silence. Not tense, not corporate, but sacred. The nurse placed the baby against Bella's chest. Warm, small, real. Tears slid down her face for the first time since the terrace. Not humiliation. Release. Outside the hospital, cameras had begun gathering. Reporters speculated about leadership fallout. Analysts debated valuation damage. But inside that room, none of it mattered. Nathaniel Crawford's empire was unraveling in real time, and Bella was holding something infinitely more powerful than stock or reputation. She was holding her future. 3 weeks after the birth, Bella returned to the Fifth Avenue penthouse one last time. Not to reconcile, not to negotiate, to retrieve what was legally hers. Nathaniel was no longer living there. The board had finalized his removal. Federal inquiry had escalated into formal investigation. His name still appeared in headlines, but now alongside words like fiduciary breach and executive misconduct. The silence inside the penthouse felt hollow. Bella moved slowly, her son asleep in a carrier against her chest. She no longer felt small in these rooms. The marble floors, the skyline view, the curated art on the walls. None of it intimidated her now. Her attorney sat at the dining table with a slim leather folder. "The prenup is void under Clause 22, he said calmly. "Failure to disclose material regulatory risk prior to execution constitutes breach." Breach. The word felt clean. Nathaniel had built the agreement to protect himself from reputational damage. Instead, it protected her from deception. "You are entitled to equitable division," the attorney continued, "including vested shares granted during the marriage. Shares, not charity, not settlement, pity, and legal equity." Bella absorbed the numbers without reaction. She wasn't thinking about valuation anymore. She was thinking about stability. "For your son," the attorney added, "a trust can be structured independent of corporate volatility." Independent. That word mattered. Later that afternoon, she met Noah at a quiet cafe near Central Park. No security detail, no press, just siblings sitting across from each other like they used to in Boston. "You don't owe me anything," she told him. Noah gave a faint smile. "I know." He slid a document across the table. Monroe Capital Ethical AI Initiative. Board member, Isabella Monroe. Not Crawford. Monroe. She looked up at him. "You're offering me a position?" "I'm offering you partnership," he replied. "Not rescue, not protection. Respect." Bella glanced down at her sleeping son. For years. And she had lived under someone else's name, someone else's shadow. Now she had something solid. Ownership. Choice. And a future that no longer depended on a man who mistook control for strength. February arrived quietly in Manhattan. The scandal had moved on from front-page urgency to slow, procedural updates, federal filings, civil claims, quiet settlements whispered about in financial circles. Nathaniel Crawford no longer appeared on panels or magazine covers. His name had become cautionary. Bella didn't watch the news anymore. Instead, she walked. Central Park in winter held a different kind of beauty. Bare trees stretching like open hands against a pale sky, frozen edges of the lake reflecting soft light. She pushed the stroller slowly along the cleared path, her son bundled warmly beneath a thick knit blanket. For the first time in years, there was no tension in her chest, no waiting for the next sharp word, no calculating how to speak without triggering control. Just breath. Her phone buzzed once in her coat pocket, a notification from Monroe Capital. First advisory session scheduled for the Ethical AI initiative. She would join by video later that afternoon, not as someone's wife, as Isabella Monroe. She stopped near a bench overlooking the ice-dusted water and lifted her son gently into her arms. His tiny fingers curled around hers with instinctive trust. "You'll grow up knowing truth matters," she whispered softly. "Not wealth, not image. Truth." Behind her, footsteps approached. "Cold enough for you?" Noah's voice carried lightly. She turned, surprised, but smiling. He held 2 paper cups of coffee, steam rising into the crisp air. "You've always hated winter," she teased. "I still do," he admitted, handing her the cup. "But some seasons are necessary." She understood what he meant. Healing didn't arrive in grand gestures. It came in steady mornings, in small choices, in reclaiming your name. Across town, Nathaniel attended his first deposition without cameras. No skyline backdrop, no applause, just fluorescent lighting and legal transcripts. Actions had consequences. Bella adjusted the blanket around her son and leaned back against the bench. The cold no longer felt threatening. It felt clean. For the first time since the terrace, she wasn't thinking about what she had lost. She was thinking about what she had become. Spring arrived without announcement. The Manhattan skyline still glittered at sunset, still reflected gold across the East River, and still symbolized power to those chasing it. But Bella no longer measured her worth against glass towers and corner offices. She stood on the terrace of a modest brownstone in Boston Harbor, her son balanced on her hip. The air carried salt and early warmth. Seagulls circled lazily overhead. Different skyline, different life. Inside, documents rested on the dining table, finalized equity transfers, the official formation papers of the Monroe Ethical AI Foundation, and a framed certificate restoring her maiden name legally. Isabella Monroe. She had not taken revenge. She had taken responsibility. Behind her, Noah stepped outside, jacket slung casually over his shoulder. "The board meeting went well," he said. "Hospitals are signing on. Transparent trials only." She smiled. "That's the point." Across the country, Nathaniel Crawford entered a federal courthouse without cameras. His legal team negotiated settlements tied to disclosure failures. Civil penalties mounted. He would not serve prison time, but he would never run a public company again. Reputation lost, control gone, consequence delivered. Bella felt no triumph, only closure. Her phone buzzed softly, not with legal alerts, not with investor speculation, but with a message from Dr. Aaron Whitfield, the pediatric specialist who had volunteered to consult for the Foundation's Ethical Review Board. "Lunch this week," he had written. "No boardrooms, just coffee." She read it twice before smiling. Life did not need spectacle to be meaningful. Her son stirred, reaching for the light. "You'll grow up in truth," she whispered. "Not protected by lies, not raised in fear." Behind her, the harbor shimmered quietly. The skyline no longer owned her story. She had reclaimed it. And just like that, the story comes to a close. But my dear friends, you're still here, aren't you? If you've stayed with me until this very moment, then something in this story must have touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. Maybe it wasn't about billionaires, boardrooms, or Manhattan skylines. Maybe it was about dignity, about the moment a woman stopped being afraid. Bella's journey reminds us of something simple yet powerful. Control is not strength. Integrity is. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote in Meditations, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Bella could not control the slap, the headlines, or the boardroom vote. But she controlled her response, and that changed everything. Stoicism teaches us that self-respect begins when we stop reacting from fear and start acting from truth. Sometimes healing doesn't look like revenge. It looks like walking away with your name restored. It looks like choosing truth over comfort. It looks like building something honest after something false collapses. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own quiet battles, then don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs strength tonight, and subscribe to the channel because we tell stories here that don't just entertain, they remind you who you are. And I'm truly glad you're still here. This story is a fictional dramatic narrative created for emotional storytelling and educational reflection. All characters, companies, events, and situations portrayed in this video are entirely fictional and are not intended to represent any real individuals, organizations, or ongoing legal matters. While the story references common corporate environments, financial terminology, and public settings to create realism, it does not depict actual events or verified allegations. The themes of accountability, personal growth, and ethical responsibility are explored in a narrative context meant to inspire discussion and emotional insight. This content is designed for entertainment and motivational purposes only, encouraging viewers to reflect on integrity, resilience, and the consequences of personal choices.